They called it Scandoval. But the real scandal wasn't the affair. It was that Bravo turned human devastation into a marketing campaign, and we all applauded. There is a particular kind of woman that reality television seems designed to worship. Beautiful, brittle, loudly self-aware, and catastrophically unaware of anything beyond her reflection. For Vanderpump Rules, that figure was Stassi Schroeder, the show's crown jewel of controlled chaos and delusion. She was both the show's magnetic center and its moral abyss, the reason viewers tuned in and the reason civilized people claimed not to. She was a producer's dream and a publicist's nightmare, a master of camera-ready cruelty who mistook charisma for character. Calling Stassi the best member of VPR is like calling the iceberg the most memorable part of Titanic. Technically true, but only because it caused the disaster everyone remembers. She wasn't the heart of the show. She was the impact crater. The irony, of course, is that she built her brand on loyalty, an idea that sounds noble until you realize her version of loyalty was indistinguishable from domination. Stassi's friendships weren't relationships. They were feudal arrangements, complete with ritual humiliation and a mandatory annual pilgrimage to her birthday party. Her fans insist she was fiercely loyal. Loyal to whom, exactly? Certainly not to Katie, the perennial emotional punching bag who spent half a decade as Stassi's human stress ball. Whenever Stassi wasn't berating her, she was teaching her lessons about how to be a better minion. The infamous Mexico birthday dinner, where Stassi lashed out at Katie for existing in the same radius as male attention, remains a master class in televised meanness. Katie's crime was being visibly unhappy. Stassi's punishment was public humiliation. Later, when confronted with the fallout, she doubled down rather than apologized. Because in Stassi's world, remorse was something performed only if the lighting was good. The show's defenders like to point out that Vanderpump Rules is reality TV, not a documentary. True, but no amount of editing can conjure empathy out of a void. Stassi's brand of cruelty was too consistent, too instinctive to be manufactured. She didn't have storylines, she had targets. Her greatest skill wasn't friendship or loyalty, but narrative control. Even her moments of vulnerability felt rehearsed, like an actor reading emotional lines from cue cards written by a PR intern. Her downfall, the implosion of her Bravo career over her own racist and tone-deaf remarks, was less a shock than an inevitability. Stassi had long mistaken her ignorance for authenticity, mistaking saying what I think for being brave. When she called the #Me Too movement a male witch hunt, she didn't merely expose herself as uninformed. She revealed the moral rot at the core of her brand. For years, her fans defended her as a straight shooter. Then she shot herself in the foot, on air, repeatedly, while insisting it was feminist to do so. The receipts are extensive. She mocked sexual assault survivors for not just saying no. She treated systemic misogyny like a networking inconvenience. She spoke of rape survivors as if they were auditioning for sympathy roles. And when the world recoiled, she claimed her words were taken out of context, as though context could magically transform victim blaming into enlightenment. The context in question, of course, was her own podcast, The Unfiltered Realm, where she revealed that the cruelty and stupidity weren't editorial accidents, but the raw product. The apology tour that followed was a performance of privilege so tone-deaf it could have scored a Bravo spin-off. Her interview with Tamron Hall, in which she blamed the black journalist for making her look bad, was an Olympic-level act of fragility. She somehow managed to turn a moment of accountability into a grievance. For someone who built a career on confessionals, Stassi proved remarkably allergic to confession. And yet, she thrives, which is the most reality television outcome imaginable. She lost sponsorships for a few months, rebranded her cancellation into a marketing strategy, and emerged richer than before. She even wrote a book about her downfall, as if ignorance were a lifestyle choice to be monetized. In the moral ecosystem of Bravo, repentance is just another storyline, redemption, another season renewal. Her defenders still split hairs, insisting she was great TV, just a bad person. This is the reality fan's favorite theological paradox, as if entertainment value somehow absolves character. But Stassi's greatness on TV wasn't artistry, it was entropy. She was television's equivalent of a chemical reaction gone wrong. Mesmerizing from a safe distance, catastrophic up close. Her every outburst, betrayal, and microaggression was a plot engine disguised as personality. And yet, she remains indispensable to the show's mythology precisely because she represents its central thesis, that morality is negotiable if the ratings are good enough. Stassi's best member status has nothing to do with merit. It's the perverse recognition that she embodied the show's purpose. Vanderpump Rules isn't about growth or redemption. It's about the spectacle of attractive people failing publicly and profitably. Stassi understood that before anyone else. She didn't just play the game, she made herself the game board. Still, her loyalty remains the most delusional talking point of her apologists. They point to her reconciliation with Katie years later as proof of depth, as if two women deciding not to loathe each other after a decade constitutes sainthood. Friendship in the VPR universe isn't about affection. It's about convenience. They make up when those cameras demand it, not when the heart compels it. That Katie, who spent years contorting herself to fit into Stassi's worldview, is now cast as the beneficiary of that loyalty is the show's cruelest joke. And what of Stassi's supposed evolution? The narrative that she grew from a mean girl into a mature woman is public relations fan fiction. What really happened is simpler. She learned to monetize contrition. Her marriage, motherhood, and rebranding as a canceled but chic podcaster are not redemptive arcs. They're sequels. She's still the same character, just in a different costume, one hand clutching a rosé, the other a microphone. It's tempting to search for nuance in her story, to insist that people can change. Of course they can, but change requires self-awareness, and Stassi's defining feature has always been her lack of it. She doesn't grow, she pivots. When one persona burns down, she emerges from the ashes with better lighting. Her so-called education in race, feminism, and accountability reads less like moral awakening than brand management. The true miracle of her career isn't survival. It's that she continues to be treated as a protagonist. Still, credit where it's due. Stassi Schroeder was a once-in-a-generation villain. Not because she was the worst person on television, though she's in the running, but because she distilled the entire ethos of reality fame into a single, marketable personality. She was self-centered enough to be fascinating, mean enough to be memorable, and polished enough to seem intentional. She was the perfect product of a culture that confuses relatability with integrity. To watch her was to witness the birth of the influencer industrial complex. Every tantrum, every birthday shriek, every sanctimonious meltdown was training for a future where attention is currency and shame is just a plot twist. Stassi didn't just anticipate that world, she helped build it. When she declared herself the Queen Bee, it wasn't narcissism, it was prophecy. Of course, none of this excuses her. A well-lit villain is still a villain. Her casual racism, her disdain for victims, her weaponized whiteness, these are not character quirks, they're moral failures. The absurdity is that her career continues to thrive, not in spite of them, but because of them. In a culture where being canceled is just a marketing demographic, Stassi has positioned herself as the patron saint of performative atonement. She is reality TV's answer to late-stage capitalism, profitable, shameless, and endlessly recyclable. So yes, perhaps she was the best member of Vanderpump Rules, if one defines best as most emblematic of everything wrong with the genre. She delivered chaos with precision, self-importance with flair, and cruelty with comic timing. She was both product and pathology. The show revolved around her gravitational pull because, like all great disasters, she was impossible to look away from. And that, in the end, is what makes her perfect reality television. Not her loyalty, not her growth, but her complete and unwavering commitment to being exactly who she is, a beautiful, articulate, cautionary tale. There's a cruel genius in how Vanderpump Rules masquerades as a show about friendship. On paper, it's a social experiment about 20-somethings navigating love and ambition in Los Angeles. In practice, it's a behavioral study on the limits of self-respect. Every bond is transactional, every fight is contractual, and every tequila-soaked confession is delivered with the clarity of a production note. The cast doesn't have relationships, they have renewable storylines. The result is a world where intimacy exists only for the camera, and loyalty expires faster than a Bravo sponsorship deal. To call the show reality is generous. It is, at best, an ecosystem of performative authenticity. Everyone knows the lines, even when they pretend to forget them. It's not just that the drama is manufactured, it's that the participants have become so fluent in the language of performance, they can no longer distinguish it from emotion. The tears are real, the stakes are not. Like any long-running illusion, VPR depends on its audience's willingness to suspend disbelief, to mistake volume for sincerity and humiliation for catharsis. At the center of this elaborate illusion stands the Bravo machine, an industrial complex of contrived chaos. It feeds on insecurity, rewards betrayal, and edits empathy out of existence. The network's greatest innovation wasn't unscripted television, it was monetized dysfunction. Cast members aren't hired for depth. They're chosen for volatility, that rare ability to self-destruct on cue. Their friendships serve as scaffolding for the next collapse. And every time they rebuild, it's only to set the next demolition in motion. Consider the endless carousel of VPR couples, Tom and Katie, Sheena and Brock, Sandoval and whichever unfortunate woman hasn't yet read the fine print. Each relationship functions less as romance than as a narrative investment. The cast treats breakups like business ventures, risky but lucrative. Katie's marriage to Schwartz, for example, was a decade-long exercise in televised gaslighting disguised as devotion. He insulted her, cheated on her, and infantilized her with the consistency of a man auditioning for the role of perpetual disappointment, and when the inevitable divorce arrived, Bravo rolled out the red carpet for its ratings. It's difficult to overstate how expertly the show transforms real pain into premium content. Katie's misery was never treated as tragedy. It was set dressing. Her emotional unraveling was edited into a subplot about nagging versus chill girls. That timeless Bravo dichotomy designed to keep women arguing over who's less hysterical. Meanwhile, Schwartz's endless incompetence was rebranded as boyish charm, the kind that evaporates the moment one realizes he's 40. He remains the human embodiment of a shrug, and yet the show treats his passivity like an art form. Every time he refuses accountability, an angel investor at Bravo gets its wings. Shiana, meanwhile, operates as the franchise's tragicomic understudy, forever chasing validation, forever missing her cue. She wants desperately to be the heroine, but the script keeps handing her the clown wig. Every time she plans a milestone, it collapses under the weight of her own neediness. Her wedding, a term applied loosely since she was already married, was less a celebration than a business pitch. Production initially declined to film it, a rare moment of restraint, until someone realized that a fake wedding could still deliver genuine humiliation. Enter the Mexico debacle, where Shiana's attempt to reclaim her spotlight turned into a case study in pettiness. The now infamous room drama, in which she demanded Katie surrender her hotel room for a bridesmaid, was so absurdly staged, it might as well have come with a laugh track. Viewers were expected to believe that an entire wedding, allegedly planned by professionals, hinged on one woman's refusal to relocate her luggage. The real reason was simpler. Shayna didn't want her nemesis anywhere near the festivities. But because reality TV requires plausible deniability, she wrapped her vindictiveness in etiquette, calling it a miscommunication. What unfolded was not conflict, but choreography, designed to give each participant their designated archetype. Katie, the stubborn ex-wife; Sheena, the fragile bride; producers, the silent gods pulling strings from behind the lens. And let us not forget the pièce de résistance, Rachel, née Raquel Levis, the human malfunction in the Bravo operating system. She entered the series as a doe-eyed ingenue and evolved, or rather disintegrated, into a cautionary tale about what happens when you confuse aspiration for identity. Rachel's presence in Season 10 was less human than algorithmic. She repeated rehearsed phrases, malfunctioned under pressure, and blinked through confrontations as though buffering mid-conversation. Fans labeled her robotic. Psychologists might call her dissociative. Either way, she was the perfect vessel for Bravo's ongoing experiment in emotional commodification. How far can a person unravel before it stops being entertaining? Her eventual affair with Sandoval, the now legendary Scandoval, wasn't a spontaneous moral collapse, but the logical endpoint of a system built on performative betrayal. The entire show had been auditioning for that moment. When your value as a cast member depends on chaos, integrity becomes a liability. Rachel learned the rules too well: cause pain, confess badly, and hope the confession trend charts on social media. The tragedy isn't that she cheated with a friend's partner, it's that she thought it was career advancement. Bravo, of course, rewarded her with screen time, the sincerest form of exploitation. The network's moral compass has always pointed toward the nearest scandal. When it fired Stassi and Kristen for racist behavior, it wasn't out of principle, but public relations. By the time Rachel detonated her life on camera, the network had perfected its damage control. Condemn the villain, promote the fallout, sell the reunion episodes in 3 parts. The same formula that once built Stassi's empire now fueled Rachel's downfall. Bravo's redemption arcs are less about growth and more about narrative balance. Every cancellation must be offset by a comeback. Every disgrace by a ratings bump. To understand the Bravo machine is to recognize its circular logic. The network builds villains it can later crucify, then sanctifies them for profit. It's a system of moral laundering where accountability doubles as advertisement. Stassi's racist podcast remarks made her controversial. Rachel's mental breakdown made her brave. It's a cycle so cynical it borders on art. The producers don't need heroes or villains. They need friction. Empathy, when it appears, is swiftly edited out. A moment of genuine remorse is treated as dead air. What keeps viewers engaged isn't emotional truth, but emotional velocity, the constant churn of outrage and reconciliation. Even the cast's supposed friendships are products of that churn. These people don't bond. They negotiate alliances. Their loyalty shifts with the story arc, their forgiveness timed to contract renewals. Watching them make up after betrayals is like watching actors rehearse a scene for the 100th time. The gestures are there, but the meaning is long gone. Katie and Shauna's détente, for instance, felt less like healing and more like a ceasefire between rival influencers. Forgiveness, on Vanderpump Rules, is never spiritual, it's strategic. The machine's greatest trick, though, is convincing its audience that any of this still matters. Fans argue over who was right in conflicts that were storyboarded in advance, dissecting the ethics of people who long ago traded authenticity for airtime. The debate over whether Stassi was a loyal friend or a toxic narcissist misses the point. She was both, because the show demanded both. The script required complexity, but the camera rewarded simplicity. Every season, Bravo repackages these archetypes like seasonal decor, slightly rearranged, always familiar. The names change, the narcissism doesn't. If there's a moral center to this spectacle, it's not in the cast, but the audience. VPR functions as a mirror, reflecting the cultural appetite for beautifully packaged dysfunction. Viewers condemn the cast while secretly craving their chaos. They tweet about accountability while binge-watching betrayal. The show is less about the characters' hypocrisy than the audience's complicity. Stassi, Sheena, Rachel, they're not anomalies. They're avatars of a culture addicted to schadenfreude. And Bravo knows it. The network has turned outrage into a subscription model. Every scandal feeds a podcast. Every apology fuels a spin-off. The participants, once aspiring actors, are now self-sustaining brands of notoriety. They don't need to win the audience's affection, only its attention. Fame, once a goal, has become an illness with corporate sponsorship. The only cure is irrelevance, and none of them are ready for that diagnosis. If Stassi was the prototype, the others are her iterations. Katie, forever miserable yet morally superior, plays the weary conscience. Shiana, the self-obsessed survivor, performs resilience like a TikTok affirmation. Schwartz, the walking apology, embodies the mediocrity that men in Bravo's universe mistake for charm. Together, they form a tragic ecosystem where toxicity is both the problem and the product. The network doesn't fix dysfunction, it franchises it. And yet, there's something almost admirable about the show's honesty in its dishonesty. It makes no real promises of redemption, only entertainment. Its participants are not victims of editing, but willing accomplices in their own exploitation. They trade dignity for visibility and visibility for validation. The cruelest part is that it works. The more they humiliate themselves, the more beloved they become. The line between self-destruction and self-promotion has never been thinner or more lucrative. At its core, Vanderpump Rules is a masterclass in the illusion of consequence. People are fired, canceled, and humiliated, but the carousel never stops spinning. Stassi rebrands, Rachel reappears, Shiana cries on cue. The show feeds on its own moral collapses like a snake devouring its tail. The real product isn't the cast. It's the narrative that redemption is always one confession away. Bravo doesn't destroy its stars. It recycles them. The tragedy, if one still cares to call it that, is that the friendships at the show's heart might have been real once. Before the sponsorships, the PR teams, and the fake weddings, there were actual human connections. People who worked at a restaurant and mistook fame for freedom. Now those relationships are props, dusted off whenever the ratings dip. The laughter is hollow, the hugs rehearsed. What was once a show about friends in a restaurant has become a cautionary tale about colleagues in a simulation. In the end, Vanderpump Rules is not a study in human behavior, but corporate anthropology. It reveals how a network, a cast, and an audience conspired to turn emotional bankruptcy into entertainment. The machine works flawlessly because everyone involved, from the producers to the fans, believes they're immune to it. They aren't. We all are the Bravo machine's unpaid interns, feeding it our outrage and attention. It runs on hypocrisy, and business is booming. Every long-running reality show eventually reaches the point where it begins devouring itself. Vanderpump Rules reached that point with Scandoval, a scandal so grotesquely operatic, it turned a decade of petty squabbles into something almost mythological. It wasn't just infidelity. It was the moral detonation of an entire franchise. When Tom Sandoval's affair with Raquel Leviss was exposed, it felt less like a plot twist and more like divine retribution. The universe finally collecting on a decade's worth of Bravo sin. There had always been signs. Sandoval's narcissism had long been mistaken for ambition, his need for control dressed up as creativity. He spent years playing the tortured artist in a boy band of emotional infants, all tight jeans and tighter egos. His faux sincerity, his endless performative tears, his talent for playing victim, it all built to this crescendo. When the truth came out, he responded exactly as expected, with self-pity, performative grief, and the emotional depth of a motivational poster. Watching him cry on Lisa Vanderpump's couch about the consequences of his own actions was like watching a snake mourn its own skin. The audacity was almost breathtaking. Here was a man who had cheated on his partner of nearly a decade, a woman who had endured his self-absorption and turned it into content, and he managed to make his betrayal about himself. He clutched his mustache and muttered about being misunderstood, as though the real tragedy was his inability to star in his own redemption arc. His self-defense strategy could be summarized in one line: "She made me do it by being sad." It's the kind of logic only a Bravo man could deliver with a straight face. But the true horror of Scandoval wasn't Sandoval's infidelity. It was the collective realization that Vanderpump Rules had no moral floor left to collapse. The betrayal was shocking not because it happened, but because it revealed that the show's entire architecture had been built on sand. The illusion of friendship, already threadbare, finally disintegrated. Every toast, every "I've got your back." Every forced hug dissolved into dust. The cast's relationships had always been transactional, but now the transaction was exposed. Pain for profit, betrayal for ratings. Raquel Levias, his partner in deceit, emerged from the wreckage as something almost uncanny. Not quite villain, not quite victim. Watching her navigate the aftermath was like watching artificial intelligence glitch in real time. Her voice, flat and rehearsed. Her expressions, half a second behind comprehension. Viewers called her robotic, and not without reason. She approached the scandal with the emotional intelligence of a broken voicemail. During the reunion, she spoke in pre-packaged sentences, clearly workshopped by someone who thought empathy could be memorized. The tragedy is that she wasn't evil. She was empty. In a show built on performance, she simply forgot she was supposed to be human. Her defenders offered psychological explanations: anxiety, trauma, neurodivergence, the suffocating pressure of pageantry, and perhaps some of that is true. But none of it excuses the sheer calculation of her choices. Raquel wasn't just cheating, she was auditioning. The affair was less a love story than a career move, the desperate gambit of a woman who mistook notoriety for relevance. In the Bravo ecosystem, that's an understandable confusion. Redemption arcs are currency, and she wanted one of her own. Unfortunately, she skipped the prerequisite step, committing an act the audience could forgive. The fallout was biblical. Fans organized watch parties for the finale as if witnessing a televised exorcism. Entire households screamed at their screens when Sandoval attempted to weaponize Ariana's mental health as a shield for his infidelity. A performance so sociopathic, it briefly united the internet in disgust. His crocodile tears dried up faster than his career prospects. Even Lisa Vanderpump, the franchise's perennial apologist for terrible men, struggled to muster sympathy. When Lisa Vanderpump begins to doubt your charm, you've truly reached the end of the Bravo redemption curve. The reunion that followed was less a discussion than a public execution. 3 episodes of televised therapy with all the nuance of a medieval trial. Each cast member took their turn at the guillotine, delivering righteous monologues while trying not to look directly into the cameras they all secretly adored. James Kennedy, professional chaos gremlin, became an accidental feminist icon by calling Sandoval a worm with a mustache, a line so perfect it deserves its own Emmy. Even Andy Cohen looked stunned, as though realizing in real time that the monster his network created had finally developed sentience. And yet, beneath the spectacle, there was an undeniable sense of fatigue. The outrage felt cyclical, rehearsed. For years, VPR had rewarded betrayal. Now it pretended to condemn it. Bravo's moral compass spun in circles while executives calculated ad revenue. Ariana Madix, the betrayed partner, emerged as the designated phoenix, the good woman wronged, the franchise's new moral center. She booked sponsorships, talk shows, and even a Broadway role. Her heartbreak became a career pivot. She handled the scandal with dignity, which, in the Bravo universe, is a revolutionary act. But even her triumph was tinged with irony. In the end, the only way to win Vanderpump Rules was to survive its destruction. Meanwhile, Sandoval lingered in the ruins, clinging to delusion like a security blanket. He gave interviews about growth, released self-pitying songs, and surrounded himself with sycophants too dim to notice the stench of failure. His ongoing refusal to leave the house he still co-owns with Ariana became the perfect metaphor for the entire show, a man squatting in the ashes of a once glamorous lie, insisting it's still home. His existence is a monument to Bravo's greatest export, male mediocrity subsidized by women's emotional labor. If Scandoval was the apocalypse, then Shiana Shea was its doomsday prophet, still shouting from the sidelines, still trying to make every disaster about her. Her wedding-turned-vow renewal farce had already exposed the show's dependence on manufactured drama, but Scandoval confirmed it. By the time she tearfully confronted Raquel, it wasn't grief, it was opportunity. Shiana's tears are always camera-conscious, her pain curated for maximum relatability. Even when she's right, she's unbearable. She doesn't grow, she rebrands. And that's the most revealing part. No one in Vanderpump Rules ever truly learns. They adapt, repackage, and continue. Stassi's racist implosion became a podcast empire. Sandoval's sociopathy became clickbait. Raquel's breakdown became a self-help narrative. Katie monetized victimhood. Lala monetized trauma. Everyone found a way to turn disgrace into content. The show doesn't produce stars. It produces survivors of their own reputations. The irony is that Vanderpump Rules began as a story about servers in a restaurant. Ordinary people, desperate for fame, orbiting a glamorous boss who treated them like expendable decor. It was relatable, even charming in its early chaos. But with each season, the cast drifted further from humanity, their lives increasingly curated for conflict. By the time of Scandoval, they weren't coworkers or friends. They were actors in a morality play written by publicists and fueled by alcohol. The restaurant, once the show's setting, became irrelevant. SOAR might as well stand for shameless, unending reboots. The brilliance, or depravity, of the Scandoval era is how it blurred the boundary between fiction and life completely. The betrayal happened off-camera, yet its revelation was filmed. The audience watched real devastation edited into content, grief packaged into episodes. Bravo didn't just document the scandal, it weaponized it. The result was reality TV's version of late-stage capitalism, consuming its own misery for profit. What makes Scandoval different from Stassi's scandals or Jax's endless misdeeds is that it broke the illusion of irony. There was no wink left, no plausible deniability that this was just entertainment. It was raw humiliation in 4K, and viewers couldn't look away. The ratings soared, think pieces multiplied, and suddenly VPR was relevant again, not because of evolution, but because of annihilation. The show had achieved what every franchise secretly dreams of: cultural omnipresence through moral collapse. And yet, even that apocalypse feels temporary. Bravo will rebuild, it always does. Sandoval will give another apology tour, someone else will get engaged, a new villain will rise. The machine grinds on, feeding on its own wreckage. Vanderpump Rules has transcended morality altogether. It no longer needs heroes or villains, only storylines. Scandoval didn't destroy the show. It completed it. The Ouroboros finally swallowed its tail. If there's a lesson here, it's not about fidelity, accountability, or friendship. It's about the industrialization of humiliation. The cast may have started as people, but they ended as raw material. Their emotions mined for content until nothing real remained. The audience, meanwhile, became complicit, demanding both punishment and continuation. "Cancel them!" we cry, before setting DVRs for next season. The show thrives because its viewers are as addicted to moral chaos as its stars. So yes, Scandoval was the death of Vanderpump Rules, and its resurrection. It proved that Bravo's empire doesn't run on love or friendship or even fame. It runs on entropy. And as long as there's someone left to betray, cry, or explain themselves under fluorescent lighting, the cameras will keep rolling. Because in this universe, there's no such thing as rock bottom. Only another confessional, another sponsor, another season. Stassi once screamed, "It's my birthday!" as if that phrase alone justified every act of cruelty. Years later, Sandoval wept, "She threatened to kill herself," as if that sentence excused his betrayal. Between those two moments lies the entire moral arc of Vanderpump Rules, from petty narcissism to weaponized manipulation. It's a show where empathy is a punchline, where apologies are performance art, and where every sin is just a storyline waiting for syndication. And that is the final irony. The show about self-obsession ended by turning self-destruction into spectacle. It didn't die. It metastasized. Vanderpump Rules didn't just reflect the culture that created it. It perfected it. Stassi's entitlement, Sheena's desperation, Sandoval's narcissism, Raquel's vacancy, all of it fused into one glorious, horrifying truth. This isn't reality television anymore.